Hey. So I've tried to make this video before, and I've never been successful at it. And a lot has happened since I tried to make that video. That was probably like 2 years ago. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. Today is, let's look. Today is January 17th of 2024, and the plan was to be out in the garage, but it's just it's just cold. So I figured I would do this instead. I'm trying to document it and keep the information fresh while I still remember as many details as possible. Because I put a lot of time into this vehicle, and as I've been looking back at some of the old footage I had, some of the details are getting a little foggy. See how this goes. In December of 2019, I had kind of been seriously starting to look for an old car to work on, and I really wanted a Beetle. And I basically ended up going to buy one. I drove down prior to Christmas, met up with this older woman, and instantly fell in love with this little car. It had belonged to her husband, who had passed away 3 or 4 years prior, and it was something that he had bought and worked on the last couple years of his life, or drove, or whatever. He owned it. It was an emotional letting go for this lady, this thing that her husband had owned. She cried, and I almost cried, and it was really sweet. My brother and I, Cody, we ended up having to pull this thing out of the barn, and there was a couple people there to help us. As we were, driving away in my dad's flatbed wrecker, I knew I wasn't ever going to be able to get rid of this car, but I didn't really know what it was going to be like for the next couple years working on this thing. So this, was in December. This was the winter of 2019 and into 2020. Ended up storing it at my dad's shop, and it didn't run as far as I knew. No brakes. The interior reeked. There was very obviously rodent activity. I didn't care. I was so excited, basically. And I had been slowly purchasing parts over that winter and spring in preparation to work on it. Keep in mind that I got the car in December of 2019. That spring, basically March, was when COVID began to happen in northern Minnesota. I remember hearing about it over Christmas, and it just progressively started to spread throughout those first few months of the year, and we all kind of ended up going into lockdown and everything, and the car wasn't near me yet. I didn't get the car up to where I lived in Duluth, Minnesota until the spring, basically. So I started going back in the spring and started working on it a little bit. Before I brought it to Duluth, my dad had a mechanic that did the brakes and got it running. It didn't run very well. I drove it the way it was. I probably put 30 or 40 miles on it in the spring of 2020, but it really didn't run right. Simultaneously around this time, I started dating a girl. I think this was April or May-ish, and that'll be relevant in a bit. Throughout the summer, my dad had brought it to Duluth on his flatbed trailer, and I pulled it into the garage at my rental on the east side of town, and there was this garage that I never planned on using because it was really gross. Started tearing this thing apart, going through the car, figuring out what on earth needed to be done, pulling the interior out and everything. Mouse nests everywhere. The wiring was not just like bad, like if you know about air-cooled bugs, it really was even worse than the way it came from the factory, which is not surprising. And it was just a mess. 2020 went on, and still working on this car, and then in December of 2020 I went through a breakup. The winters for COVID in Minnesota were pretty much inside. Like, you didn't really go anywhere. At least I didn't, and my roommates didn't. We basically stayed at home. because most stuff was basically closed. We had gone through this second wave of COVID cases starting that winter. So I go through this breakup, and I can't go anywhere, and I'm just extremely sad, very, very broken from this relationship that had crumbled. I was working from home. I'm an engineer, so I was working from home on the computer, and I would work my work day at home, and I would go down into the garage for 4 or 5 hours every night, and I did that for about 4 or 5 months. It was this very strange point in time where I had nothing but time and was unhappy, and I basically just poured my energy into this 50-year-old car because I didn't have anything else to do, and I didn't know else how to deal with this sadness I was feeling. Yeah, that's what I did. I redid the entire interior, and I patched rust holes and discovered some more that I had to repair, and suspension, all the wiring. I ended up, finding an engine builder, pulled the engine out. The day after my breakup, like the very next day, I hopped in my 4Runner and I drove the old engine out to the engine builder in Wisconsin, some, 4 hours away. And it was a very wonderful drive. I really like driving and going on long drives when I'm feeling big emotions. It's really nice to just be able to go and be alone and to, think. So I brought him this engine, and he had the engine for a couple months. It was pretty funny because he called me and he goes, you drove around with this engine? I said, yeah, I probably put 30 or 40 miles on, once it started running and I drove it around and whatever. He goes, I can't believe this thing even ran at all. Like, the fact that you drove it, very surprising, very crazy. So once that engine was done, I went and I got it. And I installed it. Had to tweak a few things, make sure it was running right. I had prepped it and it was ready to be painted, so I needed to get the engine in, get back to my dad and my brother's shop. My dad was just great. He was super willing to come and move this car back and forth from my house in Duluth multiple times in the midst of COVID. On his busy days, like, it was during the day, I was still working from home at the time, and he was super willing to come and get it and bring it, and yeah, it was awesome.
Pretty straight though?
Yeah, you're fine.
The car was painted probably May, I think, of 2021. My brother painted it, so Cody painted it. He has a YouTube channel. I will share his information so you can go see him. He's very talented. I'm very proud of him. Love you, Cody. As you'll see, the hood and the bumpers were actually painted several months prior. some point I think the body had come off the car and someone had repainted a bunch of stuff. It was originally green, was painted white, and they did a nice job in some spots and not so great in others. Whoever did it, who knows how many previous owners there are. So once that was painted, it was like go time. It was like, I need to get all the parts back on this thing. It's basically driving season. I hadn't finished the wiring, and there was still lights and things to be done. So I'm in the process of lowering the car right now. Got my new pedal assembly that I'm putting in, since the old one was just yuck and sketchy and no. It's one of my torsion bars, and I'll show you the problem I ran into. So it's hard to tell because the other side of the car is jacked up, but I'm in the process of lowering. I've already done this side in the rear, and I'm waiting on parts for the front struts so I can put those together. And I was out here last night working on this other side, and I pulled out the torsion bar and all that, and someone had Bondoed all over this, and I really struggled to get the plate out off of here because so much Bondo is built up, and you start banging away at it so you can actually pull the thing out, and I found another hole. So lucky me. I have to repair that before I put that back on, and finish the rear lowering. I'm starting to run out of time before the 4th of July. I think it's the 17th or 18th of June today. It's a Friday. So that's frustrating. I've got to have this put back together and drivable by this upcoming Wednesday, because I'm bringing it in to get all the steering and control arm bushings replaced, so I don't have that Super Beetle shimmy. And I got to get my pedal assembly back in so I can drive it down to the shop. And as soon as I get it back, I'm going to build up the new struts to lower the front and hopefully be able to drive it home for the 4th of July. Well, I got both rear sides lowered. It looks hilarious right now because it looks like it's just squatting, but got pretty low in the back. A little lower than I wanted to go. But it's funny because it's squatting. The front is still quite high, so it's still very much incomplete, or half lowered. Also, it was fun to see if the roof racks fit. This front one is pretty warped. I don't know if I can resurrect the wood there, but at least they kind of fit. Looks cool. Kind of a nice retro look. I drove it many different places the summer of 2021. I think the longest drive was probably to Grand Marais from Duluth. So I drove from Duluth to Grand Marais up the North Shore. One of my favorite drives. Well, I made it to Grand Marais in the Bug. Here we are. This is the main thing I wanted to do with the car once I got it running, and now finally, a year and a half, more than a year and a half after buying it, I've finally been able to do it. So here we are. Here's the view of the cute little harbor from the driver's seat. Car ran like a clock. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I also drove it for 4th of July from Duluth to the Brainerd Lakes area where my parents are from, and that was my car for the week down there, and I just drove it around town, and it was fun driving around my hometown in my homemade car. It was awesome.
All right, so this is the first long voyage. I'm heading back home for 4th of July. About 2 hours and 15 minutes if I'm going the speed limit the whole time, so we'll see if I make it, huh?
So, the driving season comes to an end, and I really had kind of slowly been still working on some stuff, but I mostly drove the car for the rest of that season. And then fall comes around, and sometimes I'm still a little baffled at why I did this. I don't regret it for a second. It made the car so much more fun, so much more reliable. I don't know. It made me feel more comfortable to drive this car great distances. It was funny because there was a guy selling a JDM EJ202 Subaru Boxer, and he was like 4 blocks from me. So I drove over to his place and I looked at this engine, and I think it had approximately 65,000 miles on it, which was pretty low mileage for Subarus in this area, and seemed like a really good engine for a swap. Not too much power, fairly affordable. It seems like the JDM engines are a little bit more affordable for some reason. Probably due to compatibility issues. I don't really know. But it seems like these NA engines are pretty good. It's a Phase 2 engine. Yeah, I mean, I went and bought it. I said, hey, I want it. Here's your money. And we shared a beer and loaded it up into my 4Runner, and off I went. And I pulled the air-cooled engine out, and it was sitting in the corner of the rented garage for a while. And over that winter, from 22 to 23, I did a Subaru swap in this car. I got the Kennedy Engineering adapter plate and flywheel, and that worked so good. I borrowed an engine hoist. I tried to run off of an OEM ECU and homebrew my own harness. So I'm an electrical engineer, wire harness for aircraft type of engineering. I homebrewed this harness. I bought a harness off of eBay and tore it apart and reused the wires, and tried to build this harness by myself, and I just couldn't find the right documentation to get the supposed OEM ECU. I didn't really know if it was the right ECU. Once that failed, once I couldn't actually get the thing to run off of that, I decided to go with a standalone ECU. And it's the same ECU that's in the car right now. It's a micro squirt. It's like a $300, like super bare bones, like perfect for a 4-cylinder. Comes in a plastic box. I was a little nervous about the build quality of this, but it just runs. It works. up. It took me quite a while to get it to run right. So the tune I had pulled off of the internet for it was actually for a turbo engine, similar size, displacement, all that, just as a turbo engine. And obviously they run differently. They're very different engines when you're running a turbo or not. Basically the tune didn't work is what I'm trying to say. And it took me a long time to tweak that right. So long, in fact, that when I moved out of that house, the car still wasn't running right. I had been running myself ragged trying to get this thing to work right. And there was a guy who was supposed to help me tune it, and he bailed on me. And at this point, I'm like 2 days away from needing to move out of this house. Like, this was, one way or another, this car was getting across town. So I tried to drive it across town the way it was, and I broke down about 3 or 4 blocks from my house. I pulled into a well-known restaurant, and I called a wrecker. I was like, well, one way or another, this car's getting to my new house, you know, because I had access to the garage. The car didn't run right until I kind of started to get settled in the house and had more time to look at it, and the problem was I ended up, like, it was basically dumping way too much fuel in the engine and, you know, flooding it. As far as I can tell, I'm really not an engine mechanic. I'm an electrical engineer. But I think that's what happened. And I've got clips that actually show what it was like before figuring out the tune and then immediately after. And it's like a night and day difference. I've done very, very little to the tune since that day. Yeah, I even had that guy who's supposed to tune it, he ended up trying to tune it one day, and he's just like, honestly, it looks good, it looks safe, it runs good, you should just leave it. And that's what I did. And really good power, it barks, it's a riot to drive. The whole summer of 2023, I had an absolute riot driving it around. I've got friends who have much faster cars than me, but I love my little bug. I don't need to be going super fast. Reliability is why I swapped engines, right? So 2023 was kind of a big fun year for the car. Lots of changes, but more in the last like 3 or 4 months. Over the summer, I drove it from Duluth all the way to Fargo, North Dakota, which is, I think, like a 4.5 hour drive there and another 4.5 back. There's a Volkswagen in the Valleys show there every year. And this was the first year I was able to get out to it, and I was really excited to be able to, drive the car there. So some of these cars, they're like garage queens. They're pristine, they're custom, they're show cars. I've kind of tried to go for like almost like a Honda Civic vibe. German car, Japanese engine, I can rip it around, and I built it to drive it, which is why I did the swap in the first place. And can't help but feel bad that like, oh, my car is just so ratty, you know, so almost cobbled together. And then I remember I drove it 4.5 hours there in 95 degree weather, and it ran like a clock. And I made it home even without a single problem. And I'm planning on doing it again this year. Actually, my friend and I have a 72 Baja Bug that we're also swapping a Subaru into. The plan is to be able to drive both these cars to shows. That's kind of the main overview of this car. It's been an absolute joy. It's been a really good learning experience for me as an engineer who works in airplanes. You know, airplanes and cars are actually shockingly similar. So I'm sure there's going to be more to come. There's so much more I have planned for this car. I'm undoing a lot of the stuff that I did that I don't like anymore. So much more I want to be doing and wanting to show off maybe. Thanks for watching.